So today I want to talk about Qubes OS, which is a Linux distribution aimed towards people who really care about their security. I won't go into the details of what Qubes OS is. You can check out their website. They explain it pretty good. But the overall gist of it is that the operating system is designed around virtual machines, but they call them cubes, as in they're tiny containers. And these virtual machines, each application is run inside them, so they cannot communicate with each other. And that's the difference between Qubes OS and different operating systems. The first problem I have with Qubes OS is the installation process, as I could not install it on my own personal machine. Qubes OS was always on my radar, even when I wanted to migrate away from Windows. Qubes OS was certainly a distro that I had on my radar, but I never actually got to installing it on my own machine. And even now, to this date, I could not install it on my own machine. The reason is that Qubes OS, I was not able to install it in UEFI mode. I was only able to install it in legacy BIOS mode. And nowadays, many modern motherboards don't allow operating systems to be boot using the legacy or BIOS mode. And my laptop has this feature too, that it doesn't allow legacy booting from internal drives. It means that I can only boot using BIOS on external drives such as an SSD or a USB. So even when I installed it in BIOS mode on my computer was unable to boot into anything and it would not recognize it. The other issue Qubes OS has that might drive some people away is that it doesn't allow for dual booting two different operating systems. So you can't have Windows and Qubes OS running side by side, or Qubes OS and another Linux distribution. It's designed that way, which I initially quite didn't like, but I thought that it still might be worth it if I could get Qubes on my main machine, and I could boot into other OSs on an external SSD or a USB. I thought if the OS is good enough, that might be worth the price. But sadly, it wasn't. I managed to install Qubes on another laptop of mine, and my initial reactions were not so great. So, firstly, Qubes OS uses the Xfce Desktop environment by default, which I quite don't like. I think that the user interface is very old, it is not unified, and it just doesn't appeal to me. But I could see why it would appeal to some people. So that's one reason I didn't like the OS from the beginning. Now, the older versions of Qubes, mainly Qube 3 and backwards, used to run the KDE desktop environment, which I quite really like and I use on my personal machine. I did successfully install KDE on Qubes 4.0.4, but it was an old version of KDE and it was stripped down, and it still did not manage to change my expectation of the whole OS. I liked the user interface more, but it was not that great. Putting the user interface aside, Qubes OS is simply too slow. Quite understandably so. It has to, at some points, you have to run maybe 4 different virtual machines at the same time, and that could be pretty difficult to run on many PCs. The computer that I was running Qubes on was choking a lot when, for example, playing a YouTube video and opening another virtual machine to browse files on a USB stick. On the other hand, it is really secure, as in applications that you're not sure of, you can simply run them in the unsecure cubes or virtual machines, and they would not be able to snoop around different parts of your OS. So you can really compartmentalize them and really dictate which application does what. It's as if you put every application in a small prison that they have no way of escaping from. However, the interface is quite clunky to use. It is not appealing whatsoever. I was running Qubes on a 2K monitor and I had a lot of DPI scaling problems, even with running KDE. The overall experience with Qubes is quite clunky. I was running Qubes on a 2K monitor and I had DPI scaling problems that I couldn't fix. For example, something as simple as sharing Clipboard is a quite complicated process in Qubes that first you have to copy whatever you want to copy in the virtual machine, and then you have to press Ctrl-Shift-C to copy it into the global clipboard, and then you have to navigate to the other virtual machine that you want to paste whatever inside to. You have to press Ctrl-Shift-V to unload it from the global clipboard to the local virtual machine clipboard, and then you can finally press Ctrl-V to actually paste whatever you wanted to into the other virtual machine. As a one and done time thing, it doesn't sound that bad, but considering how much the user copies a text or string and pastes it throughout the day, it becomes quite annoying. Now, this brings me to the point that this Linux distribution gives you a lot of freedom, probably more than the others. And the key point here is that freedom doesn't come free. So, if you really want to gain this much freedom and gain this much security, you have to pay for it. Not necessarily with money, but with having to deal with all of these problems and the issues that arise with this. So that's a key factor to keep in mind. So I think that Qubes OS is not suitable for most people doing anything, but there are some better alternatives that could possibly even work better for your case. Tails OS is the most noteworthy one. It is also a Linux distribution based on Debian, and what it does is that it only loads from a USB key onto your computer, and everything is loaded onto your RAM, so it doesn't leave a hard drive print, so it can be traced. And most importantly, Tails runs all of your networking through Tor, as in it has no other way of contacting the internet without using Tor. And it is really secure if you want to browse some websites on Tor that you don't want to leave a trace on your computer, or maybe you just want to use a friend's computer or a computer at the library, but you're not sure if how secure they are. So you can bring a Tails USB key with yourself, plug it in there, boot from it, and you can be almost certain that other people can't snoop on your data or whatever it is that you're doing. So I definitely recommend Tails over Qubes OS, as the overall experience using Tails is much more better, and also it's simply so much easier to get started with. Qubes, on the other hand, I can't say so.